All right, I think it's 2 minutes past. We're going to get started. So hi, I'm John Robinson. I've got my COVID beard going here. Most people on the phone know me, but if you don't know me, I'm a partner in a company called Mazarine Ventures. We are technology investors in hardware and software innovations that address some aspect of water and wastewater. We have an increasingly strong focus on agriculture. As a lot of people in the wastewater space know, ag is the biggest user of water globally. So any conversation about water sooner or later has to include ag. And nowadays, it's hard to have a conversation about ag or water without talking about data science. With that, I wanted to introduce my friends. Basically, this is a conversation amongst 5 friends, and everybody who's not featured is just eavesdropping on our conversation. Richael, do you want to kick it off with a quick introduction of who you are, and then we'll go, and then Chris, Jess, and Marian.
Yeah, happy to. Well, thank you so much for having me on, and likewise, I'm really excited to be having this conversation among friends. For those that don't know me, my name is Richael Young, and I'm co-founder and CEO of Mammoth Water. We are the smarter, simpler way to track and trade water. Our vision is to align agricultural profitability with water stewardship, as currently those are very far from being aligned. Growers are facing a number of water-related production risks, and that's coming from over-appropriation of water rights and from drought. And so one of our focuses as a company is to help growers manage that production risk by helping them to monitor their water use, benchmark their irrigation efficiency, and where required, track their regulatory compliance and submit documentation. We really too are focused on trying to identify where growers can achieve water savings cost effectively and how they can be thinking about the unit economics of their water resources. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, John.
And you're based in Denver, right?
Denver, Colorado. That's right.
Cool. And for everybody who's joining, our guest LinkedIn profiles are posted in the invite. So if you want to click on different people, you can do it that way. Chris? No.
Can't hear you.
All right, we're going to pass. We'll come back to you, Chris. Jess?
Hey. So I'm Jess Norris, and I lead our work around conservation and restoration applications in water and environmental management. We at Upstream Tech are using satellite data, both commercial and public domain, to monitor ecosystems and landscapes at scale. So going back in time, what has been happening over the last couple decades, and then zeroing in on, if I did this intervention, is it yielding the expected outcomes that I hoped it to? And if not, why? And being able to monitor and track what management practices people are doing on the field and how that links to the larger watershed that it might impact.
And you're based in Boston, but currently you're...
Yeah, so the company is actually distributed across the U.S. So I'm currently sitting in Bodega, California.
Got it. All right, Marian?
Hi, everyone. I'm Marian Singer, CEO and co-founder of Wellntel. We are based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Wellntel is a water technology, water sensor technology, and water information system company. Basically, what we do is with our own sensors, groundwater sensors, as well as with other companies' sensors, we collect information on water supply, surface and groundwater, as well as water use. Data is all funneled up to the cloud, where it is available for our customers to visualize, analyze, understand how they can operate at that nexus of supply and demand, and be able to, for the long haul, continue being farmers and businesses in the areas that they are, with a manageable water supply.
Interesting. In Milwaukee. Chris, let's try it again.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. The joy of technology. That's awesome to be on this call with everyone. I think I've talked with almost all of you at one point in time or another, so it's nice to be amongst friends. It's great to see everyone who showed up. Some of those names I recognize. My name is Chris Peacock. I'm the CEO of Aquaoso Technologies, also one of its co-founders. We essentially help organizations understand the financial impacts of water scarcity on their operations. We're really helping the agricultural economy identify, understand, and monitor water-related risks. And our focus right now is really on the banking sector. So helping banks understand the underlying risk associated with the loans and the collateral associated with those loans in the agricultural space. You can think of us like a credit score, but for water risk. We launched our water management tools back in, about 18 months ago now, focused on California. We've got about 20 banks that use our tools on a daily basis as they work on underwriting their loans. We've got a dozen of large growers and agricultural investors and packer shippers that use our tools to manage risk across their operations. We're expanding in the 5 other states, which is really exciting. So we're expanding the footprint beyond California into other Western US states. And we're getting ready to launch some borrower-facing tools so that ultimately we can help the borrowers make better decisions on the farm to mitigate those risks through partnerships with awesome folks like those of you on this call.
Thanks, Chris. And you're based in?
We're based up in Sacramento, California, although most of the team is pretty remote across the U.S.
Sure. Cool. Well, thanks. That's the 5 introductions. Thanks to everyone who's joined. From here, we're just going to, like I said, it's unscripted, this discussion. So I wanted to sort of get it back to Chris on your data science tools. What specifically are you using to create value for these banks? From the sound of it, it's like you're a little bit more fintech than you are anything else.
Yeah, I've been in the water sector for about 20 years, but the tools we're providing really are more on the financial side. So looking at the economics of water risk. So we're taking data, aggregating it, normalizing it, geospatially mapping it, so that our customers on the banking side can start tying data back to individual loans. So from a data perspective, we're taking all of that raw data and then analyzing it in the context of risk. So is there essentially enough water of the right quality and the right price to help the farmers grow what they say they're going to grow to pay off the loans that they're looking at?
So you've got some algorithms as part of this, correct?
Yeah. So we've got like a credit score for water to show the banks the risk, and then we've got a bunch of algorithms in the background that look at things like quality of water over time, quantity of water over time. And then ultimately moving into the predictive side, which is there going to be enough in the future?
So 3 different farmers in Greater Fresno could have different scores.
They could be in the same water district and have different scores depending on the types of crops that they're growing and the water management practices. And
so Marian, on the groundwater side, making the unseen seen, isn't that your tagline? So that's one of the challenges is like, they're sitting maybe on not enough water or water scarcity. How would you get involved in that conversation at Wellntel?
In the conversation with
Chris, three different farmers, they might have different water security issues, right?
Right. Exactly. So the challenge with groundwater, like you said, is that it's unseen. It's under the ground, and traditionally, monitoring the supply, not the use. We've been monitoring use through meters for a long time, but actually the supply and how it changes in a dynamic way has traditionally been really expensive, so it hasn't been done. So what we've done is reinvent the way that groundwater supply is monitored, created a super simple little sensor that installs at the top of a well. Nothing goes into the water. Nothing touches water, no contaminations. And it continually monitors, what the static water level is, and then pumping data. And what that does, and data goes on up to the cloud where it's immediately available. So you can see, hey, usually when I'm not pumping, I'm right here. And now when I pump, I drop down to here. And then when I stop pumping, I recover maybe really quickly or maybe really slowly. And groundwater supply and the health of it is really dependent, of course, on what recharge looks like, but also just on the geology. You could have 3 different groundwater basin structures in Fresno. And so those 3 different farmers could have very different experiences with their water supply. And even though they're all dealing with the same weather, they have very different geology that allows them to have more or maybe less than what their neighbors have.
So your data points, Marian, could feed into Chris's modeling as inputs to inform the score of farmer A, B, and C.
It definitely could. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. It could. And it, you know, the just that understanding of not just how much you use, but then how the supply changes and how it's impacted is really that idea of being able to, like I said, that nexus of supply and demand. Mm-hmm. So you're no longer guessing, you know, I can use more, I can use less. Mm-hmm. Then I think it would help Chris's banking folks understand, hey, this is a really good credit risk, or mm-hmm. they might have some issues.
Mm-hmm. But Marian, one or 2 wells probably doesn't get the resolution of the groundwater that you need. You probably need multiple wells monitored in an aquifer to get visibility into the availability of water, right?
It depends on the scale of the question that you have. If you want to monitor a basin, then certainly you need many, or not many, but a number of data points so that you can understand the movement within that basin. Right. If you want to understand a particular farm and the water supply on that farm, you could have just 1 or 2, you know, hopefully 3, because then you've got a nice vector to be able to look at how the water on that farm is distributed and how it reacts mm-hmm. to use in that area. But you don't need many. It just depends on the scale of the question.
Got it. So groundwater, let's go from underground to satellites. Jess, what the heck does satellites have to do with farming? Can you elaborate a little bit on what are the tools you're using to provide more visibility into water quantity risk? Yeah,
definitely. So what we're using is satellite data that is captured on a weekly basis and has been capturing data for the last 4 to 5 years. There's also other satellites that have higher resolution data, but once you start using that data on a weekly basis, you can understand what are the trends and then start training computer models to detect management practices. So you can look at something and say, this is what a riparian buffer looks like. And then the computer can learn, okay, this is a riparian buffer. Let me detect that in other farm fields. Or this is what crop rotation looks like. And then you can start detecting that and training those models to automatically delineate and define what's happening on each of those farm fields. And so if I'm someone that's monitoring and managing a watershed and needs to know where should I prioritize interventions, they might not have the farmer level data without having to go to every single farm. And so they could use a tool like this to understand at a high level, where should I prioritize these interventions? And then if I did something, is that yielding the expected outcomes? And if not, then maybe why.
And how do you sell your tools? Subscription? Or your offerings, your product? How are you selling it at Upstream?
Yep, it's a subscription-based service.
Marian, how do you sell your offering?
It's both equipment and then subscription to data analytics and visualization.
Hardware SaaS. Chris, what's your model for all subscription?
Yeah, we're all subscription, on-demand SaaS.
So Richael, on the offset markets for water, the buying and selling of water credits, how would you get involved in this conversation where some farmers have abundance and some have scarcity? How could you help out or create more visibility for everybody into risk?
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly it. Is that, you know, some people do have a lot of risk. They don't have enough water. Others have more than they need. There is a lot of heterogeneity in how people's water use portfolios, and it is just not. It's regularly that they don't have one source of water. It can be multiple sources of water, and so even, you know, you can look at you having multiple groundwater wells, having surface water rights, having the ability to do recharge. And so there are different types of water rights, and you could foreseeably be both a buyer and a seller in the same water market because of that risk. You can mitigate your risk in a water market by buying additional allocation or buying water rights. Those can happen on a lease or a short-term basis, or it can happen on a permanent basis. Or you can basically create new revenue streams for water savings and create incentives to people to conserve water resources by unlocking water markets and making it so that the more water you save, the more money you can generate through a water market. So water markets are really powerful tools. We also work on the tracking side, and I actually think that there's this huge misconception, which Marian touched on a little bit, that actually water in specifically groundwater is not well metered. In California, we're talking about 1 in 4 wells are metered. We have more information, we have more data and more resolution on that data about the surface of Mars than we do about water use in this country. And that's frankly unacceptable. We need to do a lot better of a job at understanding field level water use and field level economics in order to be doing a better job.
Mm-hmm. So we're about halfway through the call. Do any of you have questions for anybody else within this group, for each other? Marian's about to ask a question. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to pose a question.
I think that the question that I have is, because we sit on, let me back up. Traditionally, use has been the easiest thing to measure, because you can put it may not be the measurement that people like the most, but you can put a meter on somebody's well and be able to count how many gallons that they are using. And in our head, the challenge with that has always been yes, and you can throttle back your use, but if you are unclear on how much you have available, then is that really an effective way to be able to manage your groundwater resource? So I guess we spend a lot of time thinking about supply and how much is down there, and I'm just wondering if anybody else does, or if we're kind of a lonely island out here just thinking about that as well as use.
Predictive. I mean, how much water do I have now, or how much water do I have in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years from now? Is that also part of your?
Part of our what? Sorry.
Isn't that the big question? Is like, how much water do I have going forward? Today is important. But...
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's what we're getting at with Richael and the water markets, and Chris and the banks, and the risk that comes along with it.
But Jess, using your tools, couldn't you leverage your AI to predict what water flows are going to look like in the next 2 or 3 years by looking at from space? Yeah. How would you do that?
Yeah. So that's a whole nother branch of Upstream that's just focused on predicting stream flow forecasting. So we actually have relationships primarily with utilities that are interested in understanding how much water can I expect for operating or maintaining my dam or reservoir. And so that's looking at, what does the snowpack look like in the mountains that is going to melt off and then come into the reservoir? What are the other land use conditions in that surrounding watershed? And then we're predicting stream flow on a 0 to 10 day basis, as well as understanding seasonal forecasts for how much you could expect. And the way that this model is trained is by looking at watersheds all across the US, understanding, okay, given these characteristics, this is what we saw. And now that I'm seeing these conditions in my watershed, what would I expect to happen as a result of that? And so that becomes pretty dynamic as you start understanding uncertainty, climate variability, and how can we then predict what we're expecting to see.
Chris, what about in your world? I mean, predictive analytics has got to be everything. The banker wants to know if he's loaning money to a farmer, is this guy going to have water at the end of the growing season or next year?
Yeah, totally. And I think there's some interesting elements to this discussion around not just is the water available, but are they entitled to use it? And it's two different components of the equation. Just because the water's there doesn't mean you can necessarily use it, as especially we're starting to see in California in the Groundwater Management Act that's now in place. So we're going to see limitations on that. So on the predictive side, the banks certainly want to understand, is there enough water available to perfect the loan over time? But the other things they're starting to look at is water is intricately tied to the valuation of land. And so if that water asset starts to disappear over time or is not available, that collateral value starts to change over time as well. So that's actually, in some cases, a bigger rationale for trying to understand whether the water is available in the future or not, because the collateral asset valuation starts to change over time as well.
So Chris, there could be 10, 15 farmers in a water district, and they get low credit scores for whatever reason in the bank, and they call Jess and they say, tell us what kind of water supply we have coming. And Jess, your research or your investigation says, actually, there's tons of water coming your way in the next 6 months. It's all snowpack. Is that a way where farmers could get together and they could acquire more granular, more high resolution water availability data and then go to the bank and say, see, we got a lot of water coming? Is that a collaboration between Upstream and Aquaoso in that sense?
Yeah, I would definitely say there's a collaboration opportunity there. And then when you start configuring the Bureau and the state and the allocations and who can deliver what, when, and where, I think those discussions get really interesting on the banking side.
And Richael, that's got to be a huge part of your business. I mean, it's all ledger. It's do you have the ability to buy this, or do you have the ability to sell this water, and do you have the ability to buy it? That's a big part of your business, is understanding who's got the right to buy and sell, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really big issue. Is number one, where is the water rights registry, and who has access to what amount of water? So yeah, I mean, this is certainly a really big deal. I think too, Mammoth is working in the space of tracking field level water use and helping growers understand how much water they are using relative to how much they're allowed to use. Because frankly, we had been getting a lot of calls after the irrigation season, after harvest, at which point, growers have nothing that they can do to affect their water use in the past. And they were getting these reports from their regulators saying, you went over your allocation. And it wasn't intentional. They didn't know they went over their allocation. It's just that they weren't keeping close track of their meters. And so they have to buy allocation sort of, for their past actions in order to be in compliance. And they have a narrow window to do that. And so, that's when we saw that, hey, growers are having trouble today tracking how much water they're using. A lot of these meters that they have on their fields, they look like the odometers on our cars. They're not tracking how many, gallons per year, acre inches per year that they're applying, just like we're not really closely tracking how many miles per month or year that we're putting onto our cars as well. And it gets way more complicated. A lot of these water rights registries are not uniform across space or time. So, you have really complicated allocations where they can be single year, they can be multi-year. You can have pools where you have multiple water rights pooled into a single unit. You can have carryover and borrowing provisions. It gets really complicated really fast. And this is why, even though the math isn't that hard, it can be harder and harder to manage when the allocations are that complicated. So yes, it's about being able to manage allocations, being able to understand a really complicated water rights registry, and then also be able to tie in how buyers and sellers of water rights are able to do so in a water market.
And so question for each of you, lightning round, just to go around a little bit. Chris, I know your customers are lenders and banks, right? Going around the horn here, Jess, who's your customer in the ag world? Who's buying your offering? Just in brief.
Yeah, I would say it's a mix of
Uh-oh, lost you. Marian?
Our ag customers tend to be from two groups, vineyards, lots of vineyards, small and large scale, and dairies.
Interesting. Richael, who's your customer in the ag world?
Yeah,
Customers.
we have two primary customers. Growers are our predominant customers, and water management agencies who are collecting large volumes of data but have trouble managing it.
And so you're essentially in, I mean, this sounds generic and not exciting, but you're in the data management business ultimately.
Yeah, data management, GovTech. I mean, it's regulatory compliance for agricultural water.
Yeah. Jess, back to you. We lost you for a second. Customer.
Sorry about that. So producer organizations like Iowa Soybean Association or corporations that are interested in tracking their supply chain, as well as agricultural investors as well.
Hey, we got a question from someone in the group here. Why isn't the scarcity of water currently reflected in the price? And do you think this will change in the near term? Anyone want to take a shot at that?
Oh man, I could go on for hours about that. After 20 years in water, the value of water is a predominant discussion that has no single answer. And the reason I say that is the value of water is dependent on its use in many cases.
Mm-hmm.
The value of water, even in agriculture, changes depending on the crop type.
Interesting.
I think there is a big misconception, though, that agricultural water is free. And so, this is something we hear a lot, is that agricultural water is not appropriately priced. I'd push back on that, though, because there are many ways in which people who use agricultural water pay relatively large amounts of money for it. So if you look at assessments, taxation on property for irrigated lands, if you look at the energy required to pump that water and put it on your land, it all really adds up. And so there are incentives to be reducing water use on the margin when you look at how much energy you're applying per unit of water. Oh man,
Mary, you still there?
I am
All
here.
right, we'll
Can you
keep
hear me?
going. Maybe other people are on still. Oh, no, auto went. Continue, Richael. Keep going.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge heterogeneity in values. And so I think, what's really important is that we need to be thinking at, a field level scale and, regionally for basins, how we can do a better job at managing those resources over the long term, rather than sort of obsessing so much about, is it appropriately priced? Because the economics of that change a lot within an irrigation season and between irrigation seasons. And so it's really hard to capture a single price at which we can put on water. Instead, if we think about how we can manage the water that's managed and how we allocate those resources will provide a lot more flexibility to growers that way.
And so Mammoth becomes that central kind of advocate for that message. I mean, is that part of your idea, is to be sort of the spokesperson for that vision?
I mean, we definitely are active in the water policy space and trying to push the envelope on how we can be doing better and providing more flexibility to growers in a way that meets long-term objectives. I think another misconception that we run into a lot is one where, growers don't care about water sustainability. They don't care about water savings. That could not be farther from the truth, because it is water that their livelihoods depend on. This is a resource that is imperative for them to have for generations so that they can pass on their livelihood, their farm, to their kids and their grandkids. And so we need to be really thoughtful about how we can equip the primary stewards of our land and water resources with the tools they need to be doing a better job. But, that falls on us as a society for not being more helpful and, for largely making them out to be the bad guy when they're just doing the best they can.
I would.
Interesting.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I would totally agree.
Yeah.
I just want to second what Richael just said. the people that we've found in our experience who have the most at stake and the most passion around water and their land are farmers. You know, they do want to pass on their land and their way of life and their really cool operations to the next generation and generation after that. And and I think it's a really important point that you just made.
Chris, in your business, I mean, bankers, I mean, they just want to get their money. They just want to get their money. Like, what is there a level of is there a level of sophistication on the other side of the table for you in terms of we need to do more for the farmers? Farmers have to be able to have the ability to get better credit scores.
Yeah, and I would start with most of the banking customers that we work with have a farming background. They're deeply ingrained in the agricultural arena, and so it's more like talking to a farmer a lot of the times when talking with the banks. And I'll also say that farmers are pretty astute. They're pretty financially aware. They understand how to run a business in many cases. So the conversations between banks and farmers, they're pretty mature conversations in terms of how the business is operating, where the water is coming from, what the commodity prices are doing. So what are you bringing that they didn't have before? If they already had good conversations going, what's your? I mean, they've had great conversations. What they've had trouble with is tracking the data around those conversations back to the farm, back to the water district. You know, if they go out and look for this information on their own, it can take them 2 to 3 weeks to pull together a report that we can generate in less than a minute. So the banks really do have a vested interest in the farmers doing well. And a lot of the customers that we're working with on the banking side want the farmers to have tools in their hands that allow them to be better stewards of water, but also better stewards of managing their farm. And typically those two things do go hand in hand.
So if a farmer applied some new technologies to reuse water they should be able to improve their credit score, right? Or their water security credit score, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Anything that they can do on the farm to improve kind of the way in which they're watering their crops, the efficiency of that watering, the highest and best use of that water, definitely goes to the score.
Or the availability. I mean, by basically getting together some other farmers and subscribing to Wellntel and go to the bank and say, see, we have tons of water. I mean, is that something where, you laugh, Marian, but like, could 8 or 9 farmers get together and throw in a few $1,000s and then go to the bank and say, we don't know what you're talking about. We have tons of water underneath us and we have the rights to it. And we want to sell some of it, which is Richelle's business. I mean, is that somewhere where some farmers could get together and they could say, we're getting bad rates from the bank because they don't have the right data. Wellntel help. I mean, could that be a scenario that's real, or is that illusion?
I guess I would like to think so, but I don't know enough about water rights and the way that the credit scores. I have a good general idea about how the credit scores work. I don't know. It feels like in my head that there's a little Venn diagram that a farmer has that says, here's my use, here's my supply, and here's my rights. And I operate within this little center part. And I don't know if knowing across a broader area would be important. I guess I'd turn it over to Chris and Richelle to inform that.
Yeah, I mean, I think anything that builds resiliency on the farm or across multiple farms is valuable, obviously for the farmers, but also for the banks to secure their collateral. So things like water markets or infrastructure projects that can be done collaboratively across multiple farmers is, I think, collectively to all of their benefit.
So the farmers just have to get together and figure that out. It's gonna be hard. But the banks have every motivation to do it. I mean, you go to a bank in Eastern Washington State, the bank can convene all of their customers together and say, come to the bank for lunch. We're having like a summer picnic, or probably the summer's not together, in the middle of the winter, probably. And they could learn about different things they collectively could do to increase the resolution of their water security, and then here's some tools that each farmer can use to increase their score. But banks would have every motivation to do that, don't you think?
Absolutely, I would agree. And we've seen it firsthand. We've been put in front of a number of farmers from the banks themselves to help identify areas in which those farmers could be doing better, especially with the help of the bank. If the bank can help fund some things, then even better.
I have a question about the Midwest. Like, the Midwest, there's an abundance of water. What is the play for your three businesses in locations where there's tons of water? Have you thought? I mean, anybody answer that if you want to jump on that? It's a different economics, totally different ball game, right?
Yeah, I mean, at least for Mammoth, we're focused on places where water scarcity is an issue. That said, climate change and increasing droughts have made it so that it's not uncommon to see irrigation and water use withdrawals across places that you might be surprised. Illinois being one of them. I mean, so I think that, we're starting to see more and more places that are being affected by drought and water scarcity, Georgia being another. I think what's going to be really tough for those states is that they don't have a water rights system that is that really lends itself to management in times of scarcity. And so I think that'll be the real challenge for states who mostly work on or operate on riparian rights. But, in terms of still thinking about ways in which we can help growers to monitor their water use, benchmark their performance, and think about cost savings technologies or water savings technologies that are cost effective. These are still things that can be applied whether or not you have a binding water right. So I think that there could be, an area for growth for a company like Mammoth into a place like that. But, certainly the area of focus here is, in places that are dealing with water scarcity pretty acutely right now.
From our perspective, groundwater is by its very nature a local resource. So, like Richael said, there are places that you would think are water rich, and certainly the Midwest is as a blanket statement is one that you think, hey, here in Milwaukee we have the Great Lakes, right next door to us. However, groundwater stress is something that is highly localized and depends again on the geology and then also the local supply and use. And for example, here in Milwaukee, so we just 20 miles to the west of Milwaukee is an area called Waukesha. And Waukesha has a groundwater basin that is not connected to the Great Lakes Basin. And over a series of 70 years, drew down their water level so far that they actually had to be the first place in the Great Lakes Compact to petition to get water out of the Great Lakes and basin and sent outside of the basin and then returned, cleaned, etc. So, even here where we feel like we're very water rich, it's just a matter of going a few miles one way or the other, and then it changes. And so on the groundwater side, that locale specificity is the key to understanding really where there's a market for Wellntel and where maybe it's less important to understand groundwater.
It's called micro scarcity. You just made that up.
Yeah, it really, you could think of it like that.
And so, Chris, if you went to Waukesha, Wisconsin, and you met with the local ag bankers there, would they look at you like you're crazy, or would they be like, hey, actually this would be really helpful?
No, I think because we've had kind of conversations like that in areas where water scarcity isn't necessarily the issue, but being able to understand the entire water story in the context of the collateral and the loan and the land is very important. And that's still something that when we look about moving out of the West Coast and out of the Western states and moving east, we're going to be looking at still the availability of water, and it might be maybe too much water from a flooding standpoint. And what do you do in those instances? And is the farm prepared to deal with that weather and that extra that extra capacity from a stormwater runoff standpoint.
Extra capacity. That's another way of saying
extra
flood.
capacity. A flood, in other
Flood.
words. Yeah.
No, it's extra capacity. You just don't know what to do with it.
Capacity. We would love it here in the Western U.S. and California. We'll go build something to put it. But we also look at like the quality side, which impacts, can you actually use the water for the farm? Are there downstream impacts coming off the farm from a runoff standpoint? So there's a lot of other elements when we're thinking about water risk and the impacts to loan collateral.
Switching gears, because we're over time here, but just randomly, do any of you guys have a water nonprofit, a water-focused nonprofit that you work closely with, or you respect their vision?
Yeah, I mean, two that come to mind immediately are Trout Unlimited and the Nature Conservancy. I think they've done a really good job at partnering with growers instead of against them, which can be a nonprofit model is to litigate. But I think instead they've really been really good at building partnerships with growers and finding ways to improve habitat in a way that still improves farm productivity as well.
Marian?
I would add to that list the Freshwater Trust, which is based out of Oregon. They do a beautiful job, I think, of not just partnering with farmers and local communities, but actually doing projects that help improve water quality, river quality, freshwater quality, as well as now they're starting to do more work in California and get involved on the SGMA and groundwater management side. Very practical, very solution oriented, and I think that's really smart.
Chris?
Yeah, I would definitely echo the Nature Conservancy. Richael and I have mutual friends over there. We spent a good 3 months working with the Nature Conservancy, going through an accelerator program. And TNC really does do a great job working on the farm, and we've actually got some ongoing projects with them as well from a mitigation standpoint. But from a global perspective, I've always liked the work that Water for People has done, which was a spin out of the water utility side of the business and the nonprofit. And they're doing some great work worldwide to ensure water supplies in global communities.
So Jess Norris is not on the call anymore. She had to drop off, but based on what you know about Upstream, they're kind of it's probably not accurate, Marian, to say the opposite of you. You're looking below ground. They're looking at the surface from space. What are your thoughts on how Upstream could be involved in this space a little bit more? Since she's not here to defend herself, what are your thoughts about how to get them more involved?
And more involved, just so
in water, providing more visibility into water scarcity and water security risk. I
think a couple things. Wellntel, certainly our basic core is on groundwater, but we also bring in information from surface water sensors, flumes, even meters, et cetera, in order to build a very detailed understanding of that water cycle in an area, if you will. The thing that we think is really cool that you can do with the satellite data is it's actually very complementary. We're looking very specifically at a very small place. They're looking at a much larger, across a county, a city, a state, and a trend. And I think that for us, the opportunity to work together with someone like Upstream, where we're bringing both the broad picture and then the micro picture together, is really, really cool. I think they're very complementary, and I love what they're working on.
I totally see the connection between the synergies between what Upstream and Wellntel, and that would arm the banks, the lenders, Chris, with more visibility into risk. And that would also identify water availability, which creates more confidence in buying and selling water within the water district. Richael, wouldn't you say that the more information that comes in, the more confidence market participants have in buying and selling, right?
I mean, I think we're we're all sitting sort of adjacent to each other in a way where as we, if, we could just sit in a room like this and really be working through how do we actually collaborate and make some partnerships work, with Upstream thinking about like supply side, predicting how much water is available at a regional scale, Wellntel looking at below the surface, how are our management programs performing over time, Mammoth working on water use and what's coming out of the ground at a field level, helping with some of the water trading, and then Aquaoso helping with water risk metrics and lending portfolios. I mean, I think that this is kind of a dream team of water entrepreneurs to be working on this problem. So I'm really excited to be sitting in this webinar with this group and having this conversation pushed a little bit farther in how we can collaborate together.
Well, thanks for that nice summaries. On the data science tool side, what Marian, Chris, and Richael, what additional capabilities do you need for your business on the data science side to take things to the next level? What's on your wish list of capabilities from the data science perspective? If you were to hire somebody or bring together a dream team of data science nerds, what would you be looking for?
I think from our standpoint, our dream team is just building out and having much more of what we have. We are a early stage technology company. We've been around for 8 years, but we've been commercial for 4, and we are really starting to groove and sing in the data science side. And our challenge is not capability in terms of how can we be more nerdy and more sciencey and bring more information together, but how do we meet customer interest and demand in new visualizations and new analysis that would help them be able to inform their decisions going forward? We could, if I could wave a magic wand, I'd hire 5 more people to help us just get so much faster at making it happen. It feels like for us, and I'm sure it probably is for everyone else, every time we add a new capability, it spurs the idea for 3 new capabilities on top of that, and then you've got a list.
Chris, what about you? What is sort of the next year? What are some data science tools or capabilities you're looking to add?
Yeah, I mean, really in the next 12 months, as we think about how we're going to build the business, it really is the integration and ingestion of more data across more states, and continuing to normalize and aggregate that data and finding better data sets that might be available to us. Like in an ideal world, we'd love to be able to have some predictive climate models that we could put into the platform and go do a 30-year economic assessment of a particular farm, bake some commodity pricing in there, bake the weather patterns in there, and be able to identify how that farm is going to do over the next 30 years, because that then informs our financial partner and insurance partners. And I think it also ultimately informs policy and how policy can change over time. And I'd be remiss to not mention that we're a public benefit corporation. I know, Richael, you're a public benefit corporation. Upstream's a public benefit corporation. And, I think it really goes to the fact that what we're all doing in water, there's something beyond just making a quick buck or two as a tech company. Like, I think there really is for all of us an underlying desire to change the way in which we're managing our water resources for the better. And I think that's a common pull that, from a tech standpoint, if I could wave a magic wand, it would be able to get all of the stakeholders involved in the right discussions and in the same room.
Richael, what about you? What are some tools or capabilities you want to add on the data science or
Sure.
growing your business?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of think of data science as being threefold. So, we're sort of focused on this aspect of tracking and prediction. So, how much water are you using? Can we predict or warn if you're about to go over your allocation, if you have some kind of meter failure, or if you're missing your performance targets? I think of it also as being diagnostic. So what's not working, or do we see leaks? Do we see pump failures? And then also it being prescriptive. So how can we do better? Where can we implement new technologies that are going to generate water savings? So we're sort of in this phase 1, but there are, other stages to, in the near term for us to be moving into. But, similarly to Chris, in thinking about where I would make meaningful change if I could, I would really change the way in which we financially reward growers for good practices. And so if we can create price premiums to growers for good water conservation behavior, I think it can unlock not only much more data science around this, but much more conservation and technology and businesses that can really equip growers to be better stewards.
It's almost like it would be good to have a shared sales marketing team that you could all use, that could go to different cities and water districts and say, hey, I've got a bunch of companies that you should be talking to, and have you kind of all contribute to this shared resource where they just tee up opportunities for you at different places, and you get a call and it's like, hey, the city of whatever, Portland, Oregon wants to meet with you. And it just creates business opportunity for all of you. That could be something that could be interesting to kind of collaborate on sales and marketing efforts. That if
I think you just volunteered for something.
Oh yeah, happily. Let me check my schedule and see what I'm doing that day. Yes, they said yes. We're really interested in seeing where there could be a way to accelerate all of your businesses, so you're getting more inquiries and the phone's just ringing, and you're maybe you don't not everybody wins the project in each water district or each valley, each city or county, but you all are on the radar of more decision makers. That would be just a dream fulfilled if we could figure that out somehow.
Same.
Yeah, it's almost like a shared, two things. One would be like a shared technology advisory board with, I keep saying data science nerds, but like data science and nerds kind of go together. And we're focused on it because we're data science nerdy. I mean, we're nerdery. I kind of shared where it's like everybody has questions about data science tools, and this advisory board has the ability to kind of think through things. And the other one would be sales marketing. That if someone's getting in front of a district in Utah or in Arizona or something like that, it should be bring everyone along. And that creates value for the customer sitting there. It's like, hey, I get to see more tools. And then for all of you, it creates more opportunities. So
yeah, I think between the 4 companies here, it's kind of a nice vertical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody you want to give a shout out to that we're missing in this discussion on the technology side and the solution side? Who else is doing stuff in ag and data science that you think is doing good work?
CropX is doing pretty good work, so yeah, I'd add them to the list.
Okay, CropX, yeah. Okay.
I'd add Farm Mobile.
Oh yeah.
I think their work on streamlining the gathering of information about production and inputs, and enabling farmers to have another revenue stream from their own data is really a cool idea, and it kind of ties back to the comment that Richael made, that I think that part of the way to have more sales for us is to create more profitability for farmers, so that they have the opportunity to be able to, and the financial wherewithal to be able to invest in the types of things that we're going, so it becomes a virtuous cycle.
Well, Chris, if a farmer can say, look, if I do this and this, will I get better terms in my loan? And the bank could look me in the eye, yeah, you will. So that becomes like a CapEx, OpEx decision where it's if I do this, then I get, and then what's the payback on that?
Mhm.
So do I CapEx this thing or do I OpEx it? How do I increase my score to get better terms with the bank? And then if the bank terms are better, then they can borrow more money and they can do more capital improvement projects on their irrigation and whatever they need to do, or buy more equipment to increase their yield. Interesting. Yeah, it's all kind of connected. Well, this is the first of two. We're at the end of our repartee here. Thanks for joining. It seems kind of boring to call it a webinar or conversation. This has been recorded and it's going to be available online after this for all the people that missed after we dropped the call it dropped at the bottom of the hour, so they can watch the second half, which we'll advertise is way more interesting than the first. Sorry, Jess. And actually, this is the first of two data science, water, and ag repartees we're doing in the month of May. So in 2 weeks, there's another one coming up with 4 different participants. So you're welcome to watch that one, and that will also be live or be recorded and go online as well. So any final comments from anybody or any suggestions? Or
This is great.
yeah, thanks for taking the time, and have a good rest of your afternoon.